The goal is to bring you your next favorite band.
Thanks for having us. This is a very cool show.
Yeah, so through many iterations, and we finally landed on the weirdest one by far.
Just a couple of feelings, and boom, you got a sound.
I remember this one time. I had been writing some songs, and I went out. I'm just going right in on this story. I went out, and so I was.
The story's longer than the song itself. We'll go ahead and play it.
And listen, it's going to be everybody's favorite band. Welcome to your next favorite band. That's both the show title and our promise to you. We here at Stereophilia Studio are tireless in our pursuit of finding incredible, genre-defiant artists who are either a hot, up-and-coming band or a group that has been delivering for years but have flown under the radar. Tonight, we launch into Season 2 with two very special bands. Founding members Mike and Shannon Mains of Mike Mains and the Branches, and mastermind of concepts for Bright Dog Red, Joe Pignato, and master of sounds, Cody Davies. Each month, we will bring you live streams, audio podcasts, and perhaps even a live concert where you can listen to the stories and hear the music of artists personally curated by us based on what we feel will be worthy of your time. Be sure to subscribe and tune in to each episode because the possibilities are endless, and you never know who will be your next favorite band. Hello, David. Welcome to the first Tuesday of the month. Here we are.
Happy June.
Happy June. Happy Season 2, Episode 1 season premiere.
Yeah, we have to make sure we get the name and the number right because we've sort of snuck in a few preview ones before this so that we don't make sure.
Premiere, whatever.
We licensed the whole Star Wars thing. It was really expensive. So
yeah, well, you know what? You got to do what you got to do. But anyway, here we are. First episode of Season 2. And we've got a banger. Very, very exciting. We've got Mike Mains of Mike Mains and the Branches. And then we have Joe Pignato and Cody Davies of Bright Dog Red. So we're doing that. We had a little bit of a later start this evening, but we're going to soldier on here. And one thing we wanted to bring up first before we bring on our guests was something we're pretty excited about. We really built out the YouTube channel for the show. And one thing we're really excited about was today we were able to release a collection of all of the live performances from Season 1. So we're going to bring up just the YouTube page to kind of show you how that's looking. Here is, the current live stream, which is happening right now. One thing we started doing was we brought up the channels of the people who we're bringing on. So here are the Mike Mains channel and the Bright Dog Red channel. So as you maybe subscribe to us or are interested in future months as we bring more people on, you're going to see the fact that we have the live stream that's scheduled up top and their channels below in case you want to learn more about them. And then here's the one that we're pretty excited about. This is the live music performances from the Your Next Favorite Band Season 1. It's a compilation of all of them. So just real quickly,
like just over an hour, I believe, of exclusive live performances.
Exclusive live performances, right. So below that is the stuff that we had done previously. So the best of stuff, the full interviews. And then so if we just click in here
this is what I do on Twitch.
That was it's a little bit into it because I was watching it myself earlier today, but like earlier on,
Clemens, mean man.
So you said you had the banjo there. Would you? So you can see here, like here's Blair rocking the tenor banjo. Here's that Hannah Gill performance during a thunderstorm at Music Fest. Then
like the word
pepper wine. Anyway, you can get the sense there that it's just a really cool offering there. Live performances abound, and we're just really excited about that. to be able to have that out there for you all. It's not only out there on YouTube to watch, but it's also our second podcast episode for what's out there. So you can listen to the audio there, and it's just kind of a nice thing that buttons up season 1. And, hopefully we can kind of do that same thing at the end of every season. Because tonight Mike's going to be able to perform for us, and we'll be able to then maybe kind of wrap that in a year from now, where it'll be the first track off of season 2's live performances.
That's an exciting opportunity.
And then that, I guess, just real quick, the podcast is out there now on just about every service and directory and whatnot. So if you subscribe to the podcast, we're going to take the audio from these episodes, these live streams on the first Tuesday of every month, and give each artist their own dedicated episode. So later on this month, you're going to have a Mike Mains and the Branches podcast episode, audio only, and then a Bright Dog Red one. So that's kind of the plan there. So if you subscribe to the podcast, and that's kind of your way to kind of engage with this content, we love it. We'll take it however we can get it. And, just kind of keeping the train rolling, as they say. So David,
put it on the rails.
We don't want to go off the rails.
Well, yeah, that would be bad,
right.
Though. I mean, it could be fun depending on what we allow to happen at that point in time.
Anytime someone says we're off the rails, it's usually not fun, but happens. But anyway, David, I wanted to thank you one last time for all your help in leading up to this moment, and then looking forward to working together on all of this going forward.
Yeah, we've got quite a few things coming up, so it'll be a lot of fun as we sort of roll this out. And we get to meet these artists, we get to hear the stories, we get to hear the songs, we get to explore. There's new stuff, new to me, new to you, new to other people, depending on who you are. And that's what the whole point of this is.
That is exactly right. Hopefully, no matter what, somebody out there, whether it's me, you, someone else recommending somebody, whatever, we're going to find all of our collective next favorite bands, and we're going to put them out here, and we're going to, kind of just hear the stories, listen to the music, and just kind of bask in the glory of all what that brings. So, pivoting to Mike Mains, you want to introduce, their bio?
Sure. So, Mike Mains and the Branches is an indie rock band based in Nashville. Since their conception in 2012, the group has built a reputation for their fantastical instrumentation and unforgettable live performances. Mains began writing songs early in his career between shifts at a casino, which is an apt illustration of Mains' perspective on life. It's a comedy, it's a tragedy, and a fairy tale. It's a perspective that laces itself throughout the band's catalog, where the songs make you dance while the lyrics make you cry. While the juxtaposition of glitter and gloom should feel confusing, it renders itself joyfully therapeutic. And that's their goal, particularly in their live shows, to strap you into a roller coaster you never want to get out of. Their boisterousness began when founding members Mike and Shannon fell in love, got married, and in doing so minted the focal experience of the band's music and lyrics. Not just love, but with the swirling highs and the bruising lows of choosing to live life together.
And one thing we like to do is, after the bio, is kind of bring in a flavor of what they're about. So we're actually going to play just 2 quick videos. One is their professionally designed teaser, so it looks great. And then I'm going to play some of the video I took from last year's Music Fest to give you kind of a sense of their music. So here's their kind of like their teaser. So that's their teaser for that. And then just real quick, I wanted to play, this is one of their songs that we're really going to get into this later. They have such a cinematic style to their performances. So just check this out. This was from Music Fest last year. you can just see, I mean, just such an electric performance. It's one of my favorite songs by them, Endless Summer. So enough ado about all that. Let's bring in Mike. Hello, Mike Mains.
Hello. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you, David. Good to see you, Phil.
Good to see you too. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So we will definitely get into Music Fest a little bit later on as we kind of go through things. But I kind of wanted to start with some of the stuff that was in the bio there, because these are clearly descriptions about what you do and what you bring to the table as a songwriter, as a performer, intentionally. And you're saying things like life is a comedy, a tragedy, and a fairy tale, and that you're writing music that makes you want to dance and lyrics that makes you want to cry. And I thought I want to give you a moment to kind of talk about that, because it's definitely, when you spend enough time with your music and pay attention to it, that's definitely 1,000% true.
Yeah, busted. I mean, it's fitting for a guy who, you know, I get to front this like very, as you said, and I never would have said it until tonight. And I'm like, man, that's like what I've been trying to do with the band our whole career. And hearing you say it tonight, Philip, is like, oh, we're doing it, which was like our performances are so cinematic.
Oh,
right.
There's just so many pictures I took that night that I'm just like, and it's not me. Like, you guys are just like, you couldn't get that many based on it if you weren't putting out something that was just so photogenic. Oh
man, it's very kind of you. I think the more that we've been doing it, and I feel like I'm already rabbit trailing. We're off to a good start. But it's like it's a dance. Like, if you think about it, you're asking like, hello, group of mostly strangers, would you like to all come stand really close to each other and sweat a lot and eat like chili dogs and drink lemonade and also listen to music really loudly for an hour and a half, right? Like, people have to make so many sacrifices just to get there, and in terms of, there's just so much that someone goes through to go and experience that evening.
Totally.
I just want it to be so rewarding. I want it to be magic, you know, like I remember John Mark McMillan telling me, like, one of his mentors said, you know, when you're playing a show, what you're really going for is like those 1 to 3 moments. And what he meant is, you know, when we go to concerts and we go to shows and we see our favorite bands, like, there is that like 1 to 2 or 3 major moments we kind of always carry with us. And so for me, where I'm at, you know, with the crowd is like, I might right now be in a spot where our band is able to give that moment to someone else, and I don't know, that's really cool.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because people who, you know, might be sick and tired of me hearing me say it, but whenever I'm talking with someone for the first time, I always like to bring it up, that's what I'm in search of. I actually heard somebody else talk about it, that they said art is the pursuit of a pure moment. And what they were talking about was a pure moment was one where at which time stops, and one in which where like you're fully the artist is in control of you. And so they're controlling how you perceive the world, or how you know, just look at something or hear something. But in those moments, what happens is, and where music does it so beautifully, is like, typically if it's a crowded room, suddenly in those moments, that's where, if someone was coughing all night, they stopped coughing. If someone was talking all night, they stopped talking, and they all attention must be paid to the moment. And so, like, I think that's what you're talking about, is there's these moments where the artist, which is in this case you, is in full control of everybody's attention.
Yeah, that's great. And what a sacred, like, responsibility.
Sure.
Right? Like, what like, it's and where are we directing that attention to? Is it towards peace? Is it towards love? And that doesn't mean that we reject or ignore the painful realities of our existence and what we're all going through as individuals and collectively as a nation and as a world, right?
Yep.
But in spite of all of that, like, what what are we inviting people into with the influence that we have? Like, what are we inviting people into? And for me, I think it's honestly, it's like, it's surrender, it's abandonment. It's like, yes, I just lost my job, or my daughter just found out she was pregnant, or I just got fired 2 weeks before I would have gotten, my retirement. Whatever it is, your daughter just got married, or you're going to get married. Like, everyone is having all these different experiences, and people's best friends are getting diagnosed with cancer, and all of this stuff is happening, and we have this privilege of saying, hey, we're not going to reject any of that,
right?
And let's celebrate that right now we've got maybe 60 to 90 minutes to just be together and let go of everything for a while.
Absolutely.
Like, that's magic, man.
It's total magic.
It is magic. Yeah. I mean, you talk about those moments, and you also have the benefit of, like you said, you see your favorite artists do it, and I have some of those memories. We all do those, like, sort of almost core memories that sort of seem indelible. You have that opportunity to also then pay it forward. Like, what a great thing to maybe inspire someone else to create that. And that's one of the other things I love about art, is the idea of that inspiration that can be tied to that. You talk about those moments, and you talk about how you have that moment, and then the inspiration that is tied to all that. It's just magic.
Yeah, and for me, like, there are these mini moments, right? Like, the mini moments for me are like my very first show was like Leanne Rimes' country concert. I'm like, I don't want to do what she does, but I don't want to sing like those kinds of songs. They're cool, it's fine. It's just like, I'm way too angry for that. So, it's like, getting into punk rock and like going to VFW halls and seeing bands like Small Brown Bike or Mulligan, or like these cool punk rock bands from emo bands from Michigan. I was like, gosh, dude, I want to start a band, and who cares if we suck? We're just like making music, And then our band, we were like, when we started MMTV, it was very like, I mean, we wanted to change the freaking world, man.
Sure.
We really did. And again, I don't know where I'm going, but when I when I think about like why when you get on, like, what is the motivation, or no, we were talking about like those moments that you have, right. My moment, in spite of all those cool shows. I'm 15 years old. I'm in a pair of blue Dickies, my Adidas Sambas, my sweatband, and all my weird thin little bracelets, my black Atticus t-shirt, like the dudes from Blink-182. And I go to this show, and we're going there to see this band called Thursday, who's one of my favorite bands from growing up. And then there's an opening band called Every Time I Die, and then this band in the middle that changed my life. They're out of Bloomington, Indiana, called Murder by Death. Still like one of my favorite bands. They get on stage, piano player, and the first band is like Every Time I Die. Like, that dude's like screaming his guts out into a microphone, and then these kids that look like they all just stepped out of a time machine from like an old saloon in the middle of like Arizona. They get out a cello and a piano and a guitar and a bass and drums, and they just play this music that sounds like it was written in the late 1800s.
Love it.
Like, after Doc Holliday died, and like, it's crazy. And I'm like, I love that vibe. But then Thursday comes on, and I remember thinking, like, I get bullied in school. I've been on, like, I've never lived in the same place for more than 6 months. I don't live with my parents. Like, I feel so alone, but like, I feel like these are my people. So I don't care if like I ever make it. I'm just going to do it, because like that is what has saved my life, and this is what I was born to do. Game over. And I never looked back.
Absolutely. And I think those moments happen again and again. Like, like in any weak moment, something else kind of comes in and kind of reminds you of what you were here to do, or what you were
Yeah.
There's something to be grateful for or what have you. And I think one of the most beautiful parts about your music is it embraces some of that stuff from the opening. And I think there's that quote that you seem to love from Tom Waits. I love beautiful melodies telling me terrible things.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, you have these absolutely beautiful dancey songs that if you actually look at the words, it's the exact opposite of the tone. And that kind of like opposite nature of them is really quite stunning, because you never shy away from topics that maybe many people would, like, like we'll get into it in a little bit, but it's like there's stuff out there that you're comfortable being uncomfortable, putting your stuff out there and helping normalize some things that I think is what you're talking about, where someone did it for you when you were that young and you're doing it for other people, because they're like suddenly realizing they're not alone, whether it's difficulty in marriage or difficulty with depression or what have you. And I think that's awesome.
Thank you. I mean, it's how it's one of the ways that I've learned how to like be human.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
It helps.
Because people could either go out to listen to music to escape, like I want to forget everything. But that doesn't further you. That doesn't make you any better. That doesn't help you feel like a sense of belonging. That if you could go out and escape and still plug in, like I think that's what would be much better for people. And I think that's what you're kind of putting out there, and not yet also having it be some sort of heavy message either. Like it's okay to not be okay kind of thing. Yeah. And also to the point where you're saying is like, let's also celebrate this moment that we all have together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's take it back to the beginning. Let's right in the opening there, David was sharing that you were writing songs in between shifts at a casino.
Yeah.
And is that the start? Like that's where like Mike Mains and the Branches kind of formed?
Yeah.
The roots, if you will.
Yeah, the roots, very much. I like it.
Nailed it.
Yeah, man. So I worked this shift at Windstar World Casino, and
is that Texas? You're in Texas at this time?
So I was in Texas, and it was right on the border of Gainesville, Texas, and Thackerville, Oklahoma.
Got it.
And I lived in Gainesville, and then would drive like 10 minutes to the casino. And it was nuts, man. Like I remember one night seeing this woman like smoking Virginia Slims, and then one night she won like $75,000 in jackpots, while putting like $100 bills in to like 3 or 4 machines and just cranking it, man.
Right.
And then at the same time, someone else is like walking out because they just lost everything. And then there's like the security guard that's like half asleep. I was like, it's a circus, it's a tragedy, it's a comedy, it's a fairy tale, right? So like I'm there, I'm seeing all of this stuff happen, and then as I'm walking around a lot, these little melodies start popping into my head, and you're walking around all these different machines, trying to help people if they need help.
Sure.
And in between, you're just keeping your eyes peeled. So I'm like, well, I got this melody in my head, or I want to write this lyric down. And so I just write those down, take them to my apartment and mess with them. I didn't have any goals. I wasn't like, I'm writing an album and I'm going to start a band. It just kind of happened.
But at this point, you were already like you said earlier, in your mind, you were a musician. Like, so you were already. These were things you were looking for the inspiration for.
Absolutely, and at that time. I will say that was definitely a time in my life where I was doubting. I was going through, and this is a reoccurring theme in my life. It's just a really intense bout of depression.
Sure.
So I'm working this job. I love music. I'm wrestling with some stuff spiritually in my outlook on life and faith and all these different things. And then as it's kind of always been, music was this place that I would retreat to and and process what I was dealing with.
Right.
Like a healthy, it's almost like a going to the sauna, just getting all the sweating all the toxins out. Like music, then I was also very broke, so it's like my sauna, I guess, my musical sauna, if there is such a thing.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. So those were the early days, and then I started sending songs to Shannon.
And any story there? Like, how did you guys meet? Like, what was the story there?
Yeah. So rewind about 2 years before we start the band. I'm in another band called Deja Normal from Michigan. Don't waste your time. That's terrible. I love all the guys that were in that band, but it's just hard for me to hear. And I don't know. You guys know what I mean.
Absolutely.
And then
different place, different time.
Other band. Yeah. And then Definition Plexus is a band I joined. Shannon, who would later become my wife, was in that band. And then I left that band, got really involved in this church community. Had like some pretty profound like spiritual religious experiences, and then had this like kind of like, I don't know if I believe in any of this anymore type thing happen. Mm-hmm. So I went to Texas when I was 21, and then Shannon and I just stayed in touch. We were friends, sending songs back and forth. She decides to join the band, and then shortly after that, we started dating.
And then you get married in 2012.
You got it.
And you release the first album, Home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that has really great reception.
Yeah, that one, I mean, people loved that album. It's been kind of interesting to look over the last 3 albums. There's people who, and we're kind of starting to go like, all right, I think those are more Home fans. These are more Calm Down fans. These are When We're in Love fans.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that there might be like different flavors of fans.
Yeah. Like it's like we love Arcade Fire a lot. They're one of our favorite bands.
Sure.
So and my buddy he built the studio here for us in Nashville. He like loves Arcade Fire. And so I'm like, what do you think about the new album? He's like, dude, I don't know, man. I just need to
I'm with you. Yeah, the new one is not on. Yeah, so
it doesn't
there'd be a different flavor
of
Arcade
12
Fire
members anymore. Yeah. They're better when they have like 12 members.
Yep. So I feel like that in a way, there's like the Home fans who are like, you're not writing enough about your spiritual experience in the way that I would like you to write about it.
Interesting.
And then that was a complaint of Calm Down, Everything is Fine. But then a lot of people love, songs from that record. When We Were in Love, if that's the album that like our fans like discovered us on, they really adore that. And it seems like they see our other albums kind of through the eyes of When We're in Love, which is cool.
That's probably best described my experience. I did find you later on in that discography, but I think to answer, where you're headed there, I love all of it. So like, to me, it's probably a good glue between all of it, where I guess thinking about it now, the way you're describing it, if you were discovered on Home, I guess I could see somebody saying, oh, wait, come back home.
Yeah.
Whereas I think learning about your music later on, it all seems to mix well. Like none of it seems out of sync for me, since I found you more on the When We Were in Love album.
Yeah, and that means a lot. Like what I can say, and I've always done my very best on any album I've ever made. Truly, like I remember being 16 years old making my first record, like to tape in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Man, I thought that was like one of the coolest things ever. But like I've always done my best, and then retrospectively, I can look back and go, man, I wish I would have done this, But what did Bono say? It's like you never finish a record, you abandon it. So for me, I do find that there is a point where you just kind of gotta cut the cord, and you just have to, you've got to sing the songs that are currently on fire inside of your soul.
Yes.
And then let the chips fall wherever they lay. Because to me, the worst case scenario is that I release a song that I don't believe in, that I don't care about.
Right.
And then that song blows up and becomes this massive hit.
Sure.
And now I have to sing a song that's the only song all the people at the festival care about, that I don't.
Right.
While they stand through all of these other songs that I really believe in. Screw that, dude.
Yeah.
I want to sing the songs I love and I believe in, that speak to the truth that I've lived and experienced and help other people. And we'll just see what happens, man.
I completely, I can understand that 100%. I guess I never thought of it the one way where you were just talking about, like, as a creative, building something from scratch, it's coming out of your heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears, and then you put it out in the world. It's like a child. And at some point, you have to let it be and move on to the next creative moment. I guess I never thought about how hard that might be, because if it's not everything you pictured for it, it might be hard to let it go. Where, like, wait, it's just not quite there yet, and you spend too much time on it. Meanwhile, you had all these other things you could have been releasing or developing or working on. So I got to think that must be hard.
It is, if the ego is driving the bus, and
right.
Man, it's taken so much therapy and prayer, meditation, going to the gym, all those normal, all the adulting things, right? Right. You go to have your therapist and your doctor just say you should eat more spinach in the mornings or something. You know what I mean? It's like, just just be a good.
Are you reading my text messages? I mean, are you?
Yeah. It's difficult, like, but something that a mentor said to me is, he goes, we have to surrender all attachment to outcomes. Like, if I'm invested in the outcome to where my joy and my happiness and, like, my overall sense of peace is connected to that outcome, either way, you're really losing. Because even if it goes the way that you want, you've still made the mistake of placing your joy and hope in something outside of yourself that you can't control. Sure. And so, when I'm doing that, it's like, if things are going well with the band, Mike's doing well. If things aren't doing well with the band, then Mike's not doing well. So I've got to place my identity in something else. And for me, it's like, man, I just really love writing songs, and I like playing shows, and as long as I get to keep doing it, man, like, that's awesome. And the best way I can be of service to our listeners is, like, write the most honest songs possible and build a great team. You got to have a great team, and I think we've got a great team. And you just work really hard at it. And I do genuinely think, I wouldn't call it luck, but I do think there is something to be said for just, like, people writing something that's really from their hearts, and it also, like, kind of catching the wave of wherever culture is, and then it blowing up. But
listen, luck is like what, mostly preparation and opportunity. And then on top of that,
the prepared, right?
Yeah, and then also,
that's good.
Sometimes the universe just kind of nudges things in the direction of the people who deserve it. So, like, I think there's a little combination of all of that. Luck is
so good.
Is something that usually people want to blame in the casinos, bad luck. But in truth, it's more about just being prepared and having the right opportunity coming along and having the awareness that it's in front of you.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So to keep us kind of progressing here in the story, now we're 2014. You've moved from Texas to Michigan. You're having your life, as a married couple now, and you're also releasing the album "Calm Down, Everything's Fine."
Yeah.
And one of my favorite songs, and to be honest, it was very much the anthem of Music Fest 2021, was "Everything's Gonna Be All Right," which was a lot to do with more COVID concerns. Like you talked about, even like, do you want to, for 90 minutes, be sweating next to a bunch of people? prior to 2020, everyone would have said, yeah.
Yeah,
After 2020, people were like, maybe not. But, luckily we have vaccines and outdoors is better than indoors and all this other science that came behind things. But anyway, that album comes around and also is very well received. And to your point, maybe in a slightly different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that one was the hardest album I've ever made, I would say, because we had experienced some success from home. We'd done some stuff. We'd travel overseas to Australia, to Europe, and then I just got in this bad headspace of feeling all this pressure to like follow things up, which isn't where my head was. When I made our first record, it was just, I've got this thing inside of me that needs to get out, and I want to share it with people. So I always tell young artists, like, always, just keep it about the art. Like, always keep it about the art. I promise everything else will take care of itself.
Sure.
Yeah, but I had to really learn those lessons during the release of that record, the touring of that record. Let the people who are good with spreadsheets be in spreadsheets, and you just hold the microphone and don't fall over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everyone should stay in their area of comfort and expertise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I want to get to, and this is normally what I hear from people who are fans and followers of the show. They're like, get to the music. So anyway, you had mentioned you would play a song, and so we're going to jump now to the next album. We talked about it a little bit earlier, 2019. And there's a 5-year gap there, so I don't know if there's something you can share there. But 5 years later, you put out the album When We Were in Love. And we again teased a little bit of the content of it, but one of the songs on that album is Briggs. Yeah, it's on that album, right? Yeah. And it's probably one of your more popular, recognizable. If someone had heard a song, it could very well be that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even that, it's Shannon's maiden name, correct?
It's her middle name.
Middle name, got it.
You got it. Yep.
So what I guess we'll do is, what we'll do is we'll give you center stage, and you can intro the song however you'd like, and then we'll let you play, and then we'll come back on afterwards, and we can continue to talk about some of the content of that album, and then maybe a little bit about Music Fest, and have you kind of promote some other stuff.
Awesome.
But yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, this is a song I wrote for my wife, Shannon. Shannon Briggs Mains. Yeah. I'm just going to give it a shot here. Close your eyes. I mean it for a second. Close your eyes. Baby, do your best to concentrate your mind. Fix it upon whatever you like. I'm drunk on a memory back when we were just 17. Holding Lake Michigan with your eyes on me. I had my hands deep in the pockets of my blue jeans. Said you could be my Maryland, I will be your James Dean. I knew that you could fix my soul. I wanna waste a while with you, baby, in the living room. Oh, I'm never gonna sleep again. You lovely creature washing over me like rain. Slowly draining all the black out of my veins until my eyes shine gold as the morning. was loved by a woman. Out in the summer days, driving down to Dallas in a summer haze. Oh, sugar, I was hooked when you walked off the plane, standing like an angel with your suitcase, and all I wanted was to be your guardian. I wanna waste a while with you, baby, in the living room. I'm never gonna sleep again. You lovely creature washing over me like rain, slowly draining all the black out of my veins, under my eyes shine gold as the morning. I was loved by a woman. I wanna waste a while with you. 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 Thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you. That was terrific.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Oh, that was
An
awesome.
honor. It was an honor.
And so a lot of the you talked about, like When We Were in Love, has a lot of elements of both the challenges of marriage. It's not, I think you even put it this way, it's not just the swirling highs of love, but it's also the bruising lows of life together. I think that's a direct quote from either you or her. And I think also there's other songs in there about the bouts of challenging with either depression or what have you. And again, it's like, that's a bold ass decision to kind of say, you know what, I'm not just going to write these songs, but I'm actually going to be very open and honest and put these topics out there and be comfortable with it. Or again, uncomfortable with it, but okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've just never, to quote the great Reverend Ron Swanson from Parks and Recreation, never half-ass anything, like whole ass one thing. So
yes,
I've never been able to, I don't know, just beat around the bush, like the only way for me has always been through. I wish it'd be awesome if there was another way, but so I've got to write my way through a really, really dark time in our marriage where we don't know, like,
right.
Is this thing that we've been building like about to fall apart?
Yeah.
How do you save it?
Mm-hmm.
And then
to your point earlier, like everyone's going through this stuff. Like, 6 years ago, 15-year marriage of mine didn't make it. And it's like to ignore those things or to not bring that out and like you're just suffering alone for no value. Like if you were able to talk with other people saying, yes, I struggle with that too. And oh my gosh, that drives me batty. But here's how I got comfortable with it. Whatever. Or no, when I got there, it was over. Whatever. Like, the point is, to your point earlier, like this is the only way to kind of be human is to kind of be much more open and out there.
Gosh, that's so good, man. And I'll tell you the inspiration of it, man, is so I mean I really love U2. And there's an interview between Bono and a guy named Eugene Peterson who wrote message translation of the Bible. And it's just this really cool conversation about the Psalms, which is some of my favorite ancient literature, period. And Bono and Eugene are talking about it, and Bono goes on this bit about, he goes, why I'm suspicious of most Christians and their music is it's not cutting at the heart of what it means to be human. Like, if you want to write an honest song, a song that honors God, sing about your bad marriage. Sing about how you're pissed off at the government.
Sure.
And that just, man, it was like somebody rang a gong inside my soul. And I thought, man, and my therapist who I was with at the time that Shannon and I were going through that was like, dude, you got to go back to the studio.
Back to the studio, right? I read that, like where they were like, what you have out there isn't what you actually want to produce.
Yeah. So I threw away, I mean, dude, we worked on over 55 songs, like whittled those down over like 4 years, whittled those down to like 25 or 30 songs that we recorded live in the studio. Whittled that down to 15, then threw away like 8 of them, and then wrote Live Forever, Breathing Underwater, Around the Corner, Only Thing I Need.
Which are all like the best songs on that album.
Right? Right? And then we put that out, and we get like somewhat decent reception, and then there's just, I'm like, how do we throw a little more life into this album cycle, and I literally, our manager's like, do you have any other songs that, laying around? I'm like, well, I got this Briggs song that was more of like a demo. I don't know if anyone will care. We put that out with like, without even really thinking about it, let's just see. And that ends up being the biggest song from that album, which is just crazy.
Right.
But it reinforces, that what that song has in common with Live Forever. I mean, all of the songs on that record, but in particular, like you said, the best songs on the album. Like, I feel like I was in this sweet spot of celebrating, the light and the darkness of being human without trying too hard.
It had the most honesty and the most genuine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing the way that those songs still feel like really fresh is really has been really nice. So moving forward, that's kind of my recipe for success. I just want to have songs that feel really good to sing live.
Yeah, but and again, to kind of put a bow on this is like the songwriting is amazing. Like I'm just so impressed, song after song after song, and then the live performance, which is what I live for. Like that's what I always want to go do. Is that's fine and all if I can listen to your studio recording, but I want to go see you perform it. And like we talked about earlier, your performances are cinematic. And it's just really cool. So I have a few pictures here from Music Fest. It's going to overlay over the top of us here, but just to give you kind of a flavor of things, like this is again like just how cool this is. Like that's if you want to introduce anybody else in the band too.
Yeah, man. So the beautiful man on drums is Dom.
That's one of the best
Dom
drummers
Jarrett.
I've ever heard. If I could
ever.
Oh my God, he is so good.
Ever. And then Mr. Zach Looper on guitar. And so those guys are, they play with a guy named John Mark McMillan. That's kind of their main band. And John was off the road. And so they're back out with him now. So
got it.
We're kind of putting together a new band all based out of Nashville, because that's where Shannon and I are. And it just makes way more sense. But those dudes...
Yeah.
Go check out John Mark McMillan. Go check out any band those guys are playing with.
Yeah. This is another cool shot. You get to see Shannon here on the keyboards. And then this one is
I think what Phil is not mentioning is it's also like 98 degrees at this point in time during this.
Yeah, it was so hot.
Yeah.
It was so hot.
But yeah.
That's awesome.
And then one other thing about the Music Fest show, I don't know if this is something I watched you in the middle of a song change the tune of your entire guitar. So I don't know if you were going either adjusting it in the middle of the song, or did you need to tune it in the middle of it? Like you were listening to yourself tune the guitar while singing.
Yeah.
And then hit obviously a pedal and brought it back alive. Yeah. I was absolutely just like, I was looking around. I was like, does anybody realize what he's doing right now?
That happens so often that I don't even realize when you break it down like that, it sounds like I'm way more technical than I am. But I assure you, I was writing the struggle bus all the way to this interview tonight. But I think with that, in that moment, I probably just like heard a couple of strings out of tune.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, mute. And then I'm just the songs just kind of get to this place where like I'm singing them, but I can split my attention for a couple of minutes if I have to dial something like that in. When we get big and massive and rich and famous and have like 10 different houses, I'll probably have somebody that I can pay to.
Right, you can just hand it off.
For me.
Yeah.
Take this, please, sir.
Get rid of
fetch
the
me a
guitar.
Gatorade while you're at it.
2 strings are out of tune. And then the last thing that happened at Music Fest that I wanted to mention was I kind of I might either be a handler or a bodyguard already, because you wanted to come out into the audience, but because of COVID, there was like a gate up. And I saw you like eye it up. You were like, I'm going to jump it. And then you thought better of that. And I happened to be standing right where you were, and you like put a hand out, and I helped you over the gate. So I was that guy. You won't remember that, but I will.
I remember now, dude, vividly. You knew I was about to break something, dude.
I know, you were like, I was like, I hope he doesn't. Okay, good. Yeah, I'll help you down. And then I helped you back up on the stage. But anyway, yes, I mean, stunning show. Amazing music. Hopefully people, off of this and whatnot want to dig in deeper. Anything you want to promote specifically, whether it's, a certain channel, a certain whatever, the site, whatever, or even some upcoming shows.
Man, I would just say Music Fest. We're playing that this year again, I think, right? Maybe?
They're still releasing, I don't know. Yeah, they drip. Right around now is when they start announcing things, but nothing's final for another month.
I can't remember. I'm just trying to
I did see recently you announced you're I think headlining something down in Alabama, some sort of arts festival.
We're doing that. We're playing some stuff in Dayton, Ohio. You'd think I'd be better at knowing this stuff, but I just get.
Well, your site has it.
Yeah, my website, MikeMainsMusic.com.
Let's bring that up here.
I really don't update because my management team does that because they realize I would probably say we're Metallica or something. I know that here, this is how I'll tell you what I have coming up. I'm going to get out my calendar and go to July, because I think I have a show in July. July 7th. At the Levitt Pavilion in Dayton, Ohio. I am playing a show because it's in my calendar. And if you would like to come and see me yell loudly in Dayton, Ohio on July 7th, that's where I'll be. David, Phil, thank you guys so much. It's truly an honor, and I appreciate you creating a space for artists like myself to get more exposure. And thanks for your questions and time. It meant a lot to me.
Oh, listen, we're truly honored to have you on. Thank you for performing, and thank you for sharing your story tonight.
Thank you so much. And until I need you to help me over the next massive piece of steel.
Absolutely. I will be there.
Awesome. All right, you guys.
Thank you so much, Mike.
You. Take care.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye.
Have a good day.
So there's Mike Mains. Mike Mains in the Branches. Wonderful story. I guess started in the Texas casinos, back to his home where he grew up in Michigan, and then now is in Nashville and producing great music. Honest music.
Very honest stuff. He mentioned the joy with the sorrow, the sort of sides. There's a bit of you use the Tom Waits quotes. There's a bit of the John Lennon-esque to that as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So it's nice to hear that type of songwriting continue on.
Absolutely. So cool. Well, without wasting any time, let's pivot right off to our other interview for tonight. We have 2 members of Bright Dog Red, and I think we have a good bio here. You want to?
Yep, I'm jumping over to it now, so I have my notes. I apologize.
No,
okay,
you're good.
Here we go. Bright Dog Red is celebrated for a sublimely marrying jazz with hip-hop, electronic music, according to Jazz Times, has long been a fixture of the New York City jazz and improvisation scene, according to Jazz Journal. The group's proudly unanchored improvisation, according to Downbeat, has been described as Mahavishnu Orchestra meets Diggable Planets, a fantastic combination as far as I'm concerned. Founded by, it is. I think I'm in so much.
When I read that, I was like, that's a home run right there.
Oh my gosh. Founded by Joe Pignato. A BDR is comprised of a rotating cast of players. In addition to Pignato on drums, percussion, and concepts. Under the Porch, which is the latest release, features Eric Person on soprano and alto saxophones, flutes, and effects. Tim Lavev on electric bass. Tyreek Jackson on electric bass and guitar. Cody Davies, who will also be joining us on sounds. Mike LaBombard on tenor saxophone and effects. Anthony Berman on acoustic bass, and Matt Coonan on poetry, freestyle, and voice.
So we have a little bit of like an intro to their music, and there's some voiceover work here. This is something that they released after the Under the Porch release. So it gives you a little bit of a sense of their music and a little bit of a sense of how they're kind of structured. And then we're going to really get into this. It's going to be such an interesting conversation. So here's a little bit of Bright Dog Red.
Bright Dog Red, an improvising collective from Albany, New York, will release Under the Porch on May 20th, 2022. Under the Porch marks the ensemble's 5th album since signing with Rope-A-Dope in 2018.
I have no way to really fade out of that. I guess that's the best I could do, but we're going to maybe let that kind of simmer in the background while we introduce. I want to make sure I get it right. It's pronounced Joe, right? I'm just kidding. Joe Pignato, the mastermind of concepts, and the founder, correct? And then Cody Davies on sounds.
Yeah, that's great.
That is so cool. So anyway, so looking forward to this conversation. Would love to just even start off with the very first, the way that everywhere I read, which speaks to the consistency of how you must describe yourselves, is it's an improvising collective. And I just think that's such a cool phrase. It really kind of gets to the heart of what you're trying to do here. So I thought maybe let's start there. Maybe you could give a little bit of a description of that phrase for the band.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Cody might have some thoughts because he's been in the band from the very first incarnations.
Excellent. Founding members, love it.
That's right. First of all, kudos to both of you for not butchering our name, which is often presented as Bright Red Dog. So we appreciate that.
I had to get the Clifford visions out of my head.
And thanks for not butchering my surname. So kudos there. Excellent.
Right. Yes.
So we use the term improvisational collective because it's probably the best way to describe the fact that the membership of the group is somewhat fluid, and it's fluid, I think, really functionally more than out of like any kind of vision. So the vision originally for the group was that it would be a kind of consistently working group with fixed membership. And I'm a professor of music at one of the SUNY campuses, and members of the group, like Cody, who you'll hear from in a minute, are in some cases former students of mine. And working with those former students has been great, but of course they're all much younger than me, and they're at stages of their life where they have major life changes, like getting married or taking new jobs or moving. And so
babies.
Yeah, babies, exactly. So we found ourselves replacing members a lot. And suddenly, went from 5 or 6 original members to 20 people had been in the group over the course of 2 years. But there were core people that were always part of the collective. So we thought, well, let's take advantage of that. Let's have the core members that recur and then bring in people here and there as guest soloists or guest contributors to our albums. And that's really worked great, and actually has actually evolved from, let's say, a practical solution to even a vision for the band and for how we're working on our new album, which is not out yet, but we're working on for some time in the future.
Yes, and we'll definitely get into that. Like, you've been, I would call it prolific for the last 5 years, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But thank you for that description. Yeah, Cody, anything you would want to share on that, either the phrase or just the founding moments? You were founded in 2015, is that correct?
That is correct.
I think Joe says it best. As the head of concepts, he'll probably do the best job at explaining any further concepts.
So I guess I want to go slightly, if you don't mind, Joe, a little bit farther back than 2015, because I think you were, I don't want to say experimenting because you knew what you were doing, but like you were playing around with improvisation and how that would speak to music creation for a while. I found that there was a faculty band called Adam 3.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you really dig deep, Philip. Excellent.
That was a good one.
And so that was something. So it's SUNY Oneonta, correct?
Correct.
I'm a SUNY graduate myself, actually.
Oh, wonderful.
I went to SUNY Geneseo.
All right.
So I was thrilled to learn a little bit more there. So anyway, it's more faculty based, not student based, and so Adam 3 is out there. And I don't know if you wanted to share a little bit about that and how it kind of like maybe laid the groundwork for all this other stuff.
Yeah, I think Adam 3 was kind of representative of what you said. I've been working with improvisation as an approach to music making for really, as long as I can remember. And while I first started teaching, it was in the first few years I started teaching at SUNY Oneonta. I had two colleagues, one who's now at NYU, Paul Geluzzo, who's a wonderful bass player, composer, and audio engineer. And the other was Orlando Legname, a brilliant guitarist, composer, also an audio engineer who's unfortunately no longer living. But the three of us started improvising, and that group was formed. And we performed quite a bit throughout New York State. And I think, kind of became like within academic circles, a group that could find work doing pretty avant-garde music. And that was pretty exciting for us. But it was about improvisation, but it was also about exploring electronic instrumentation. And so I was using like all electric drums and triggers and original samples. And we were experimenting with things like that and sort of extended techniques. So it's a separate kind of project from Bright Dog Red, of course, but there's definitely a lineage there, and you're right to bring it up as a kind of thread that's gone through my work.
That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
I got to see Adam 3 as a student as well.
Maybe that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so was that? I would love to. Inspirational? Was it strange? Was it all of the above? Like what?
It was strange. But
was it a class requirement?
No. No, but it definitely kept me interested in working with Joe. Joe made a big impression on me at SUNY Oneonta from day one. He said, if you're into electronic stuff, you need to join my class. And I was like, that's I'm going to be hanging out with him.
And so what were you studying at that moment? Because I'm guessing it wasn't like sound and keyboard per se, unless it was. I could be wrong.
No, I was a music industry student, which is the big program at SUNY Oneonta. And
Right.
I believe that was the first semester that Joe had offered the experimental music ensemble. Was that its first name? It had two names, right?
That's the official name, but we tend to call it the Experimental Music Group, or EMG.
EMG, yeah. And I was super interested in that, and kind of showed up and was just asked to play, and just I wasn't, I had to kind of, we'll get into that later, but I had to I really needed to be on my A game to stay in the class, and I really felt a lot of really wanted to deliver, and it pushed me into some really interesting places. I it was the first. That was where I started doing this kind of work that I do with Bright Dog Red.
That's so cool. That
Yeah.
is very cool. And I guess I'm going to stay slightly ahead of the Bright Dog Red here, because this was, I don't know if this lays a groundwork. It might, but I just found it to be super interesting, so I wanted to ask this too. In 2011, you performed a piece with a friend of yours, or I guess even a high school friend, Ivan Robertson's short story, "The Lost Indian."
Yeah, good.
And,
Wow.
and he was in. So the other thing about 2011, I guess, is important for the creation of this was because one of the big points of what you were trying to accomplish was how technology keeps us connected, but then the breakdown of that technology makes us feel less connected than we would have in the absence of it. And I thought that was very profound, because like I see that in people who are like, oh, I texted this person, I didn't write back. And it was like, well, let's not forget about the point when you wouldn't have been able to text them in the first place, and you wouldn't have this empty feeling right now. But anyway, I don't know if that was the whole point of that performance or not, but it involved, at that point, it was a big deal, Skype, because he was in Ireland and you were here in New York. And then some of the performers were all over the place. And so you used the ability of bringing together performers who weren't in the same space through that technology. And I just thought it was kind of a cool moment. I just wanted to give you the chance to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, Ivan's a friend of mine from high school, and he's a really great writer. And his writing had always struck me as being somewhat. It reminded me of films, of screenplays, and so I'd read his work, particularly his short stories, and I would, the imagery would be so clear, and I would imagine music to it. And so we started talking about doing a project, and of course he's living in Ireland, and I'm not, so we used technology to communicate, and I had been thinking in general and was writing a series of pieces about connecting people, and that was something I got exposed to through one of my teachers, one of my composition teachers at NYU, the late Dinu Getso, was coordinating what he would call asynchronous web jams, and he was not the only one using that term, but that was for me a new term when I heard him use it. He was doing this in the late 90s. Eventually he coordinated pieces using Internet 2, where you can have very low latency and much realistic interactions. But in those pieces that we were doing before Internet 2, the pieces where we would do things like, we would record a group in New York and take 15 seconds of it, digitize it, which would take a long time to record it, and then digitize the 15 seconds and then send that to another group of people, let's say somewhere else in the world, like Australia or Canada. The possibility that seemed to me to be so enticing that it was actually what was organizing us all. More than the work, we were excited about the possibility of being able to collaborate in that way. So with that piece that you're referencing, which was called All Over, which was a silly play on words because we were all over the place, but also the idea of ending was a big piece of the story. I tried to create a composition where all the participants could work in a way that was structurally and formally accessible to the audience, so that even though the music would be somewhat avant-garde, it would follow a form. There'd be a story. The narrative wasn't a clear narrative with beginning, middle, or end, but there were characters, they would recur, you would get sort of glimpses into their life. And Ivan took a much longer story, and he, the story you referenced, and then he edited it down into just kind of like the bare minimum essential narrative elements.
Sure.
And my goal as a composer was to create music that would bridge those elements, and then I sort of, as the organizer of the event, I brought in soloists who would hear the music I created bridging the events, and they would be part of that bridge. So their contribution was to create these short sequences where they would respond to the ending of one episode and bring us into the beginning of the next episode.
Yeah.
So that was one of a series of pieces I did for distributed ensembles.
Yeah. I thought when I heard you talk about it, it was just so interesting to think about, like, you have no like way other than to look at the world through the lens that you have. So like you have the lens of a music composer and a improvisationalist. So you're listening to his literature and hearing music. And I was just like, wow, that's just so cool to listen to and watch. And like there was probably just stuff popping into your brain as you were either reading or hearing it. I don't know. It's just kind of a cool thing to kind of witness.
It was cool to be part of. It really was.
Yeah. And then real quick, 2014, you won the Susan Sutton Smith Prize and took 5 students over to Israel. Is that right? To Musrara Mix 14. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a big festival that happens in Israel, in the Musrara neighborhood, which is actually, right where Palestine and Israel sort of come together. And so it's a contested area, and but it's also a culturally rich and exciting area. And the festival is very much about being on that. The word they use is on that seam between those two worlds.
Sure.
And they use that term purposely because the word for border and the word for seam in Arabic and in Hebrew, as I understand it anyway, are very similar. And so they want to think of it as a kind of coming together.
Sure.
But they're not naive, like they're living that every day, but they do have this vision for how can you find ways to be human in the face of that kind of inhumanity. And so taking students to that festival was life-changing for them, but also for me to be there and to be performing. And we did a piece that involved the students who had never seen or met each other, students from Israel, students from the US, preparing using these types of technologies we're using tonight, voice over internet protocol. And, we were using Skype at the time, and asynchronous things like Facebook groups and messaging to get the students to collaborate so that when they got together in the short span of the 4 or 5 days they had at this festival, they could create an original composition and perform it. And so it was really exciting to see the students do that. And see what they came up with, and then to see the reactions they had to sharing it with their Israeli counterparts and vice versa was pretty amazing.
Sounds incredible. Yeah, and then so that's 2014. So when you come home, we're burgeoning onto that beginning of Bright Dog Red. So I read this other quote. I think this was in a bio of yours or something, that you were looking for music without ideation, where the musician is just feeling and not thinking about what to play. And I guess that's when I hear about what Bright Dog Red is trying to do, it seems like that's what it's trying to do.
Yeah, I don't even know where that quote came from, but I'm paraphrasing the words of a great jazz improviser, one of the, real leaders of that tradition, and one of the innovators of that tradition, Gary Peacock, a bass player who's no longer with us, but has, maybe his most high-profile association is with Keith Jarrett and Jack DeJohnette in this trio that's sometimes referred to as the Standards Trio. But I knew Gary Peacock because I worked for ECM Records, the label that recorded all the Keith Jarrett records, as well as other projects that he was involved with. But he has had a long history. He was the bass player, for example, on some important records from Albert Ayler. And so that's how I connected with him to get that quote. We were talking about Albert Ayler for a paper I was doing when I was working on my doctoral studies. And he agreed to sit for an interview, and we had a really good conversation. And in the conversation, it led to, well, what are you doing these days? Because he knew me when I was younger, and can you send me some recordings? So, of course, I was reticent to share my work and intimidated to have him listen, but he was really, really generous with his feedback. And what he said at one point, it was a bit of critique that was really valuable. At one point he said, what are you doing around, 3 minutes and 40 seconds or whatever it was? And I said, well, I don't know, what am I doing? He said, I hear you're sort of trying on virtuosity. And he said, the way you're doing it indicates to me that you are ideating, you are thinking through what you're doing. And that that's actually going to be a hindrance for you. When you express yourself in other ways, you're probably not thinking about it with the same deliberate or intentional effort. And so pursuing sort of those moments of well, actually, I'm going to jump to the present real quick. I had a conversation during a session with Cody and with our guitarist and sometimes electric bass player, Tyreek Jackson, who is a neuroscientist. And he is studying, as a neuroscientist, he is studying the relationship between control and expression in cognition, how the various networks that control different aspects of our cognitive functioning activate in relation to those two concepts, control and I think the term he was using was expression. That there is not necessarily tension there, but there's a relationship between those two things, and sometimes you're dependent more on one set of networks and another, and it's the understanding of how that works is sort of in the nascent stages. But but yeah, that's what I think Gary Peacock was talking about from his many years of experience as an improviser. That there is this thing, there's the psychologist whose work really crossed over about 25 years ago, Mahai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book with the concept of flow. That when people are achieving something or doing something at a high level, they get into this flow state. And I think that's what we're talking about, is how do you get away from saying, oh, here's where I'm going to do X, and simply X comes out because of the moment and the musicians around you. So I was thinking about that and how it might be, how those concepts might be teachable. Like, how could I impart those ideas to my students, or maybe more effectively get them to experience those two things so that they think about the relationship in their own playing and expression.
Totally. And I guess it has to be teachable because, to use, I don't always love them, but like a sports metaphor, they always talk about a collegiate star goes to the pros and struggles, and then the game slows down for them. And that must be where they're not thinking as much, and they're just getting into that, they're in that moment, and the moment's not too big for them. So there's got to be training and reps and preparation and all these other things that could go into the coaching or the teaching of it, that then would take that talent and allow it to be unleashed. So that's probably a good question for Cody. Here it is, 2015. This is where the first Bright Dog Red shows are happening. And why don't you share, I'm guessing, it's got to be intimidating, I would think, because you're going to these moments where you're like, okay, there's nothing written down and it's fully improvised. Will the moment be too big, or what have you? Anyway, I'm conjecturing, but why don't you share how that felt at that time?
It felt like I think I had gotten some reps in at that point, so I didn't feel too crazy, and I had actually, I'd been improvising. Improvising was my strong suit even before I got to college. Originally, I was a bass player, and I think it was always kind of easy for me to just kind of step into that world and just kind of listen and respond in the moment and not worry too much. At the time, too, I was definitely had an attitude of almost wanting to scare the audience, or kind of be like, yeah, you don't get it, or something like that. So I was never really, which is silly and cynical, but yeah, at the time I didn't really have a whole lot of fear stepping up there, and now it's kind of gotten to the point where I just trust. I just have to trust my ability before the show starts, and I have to trust that the band that I'm with has a good understanding of what I'm doing, and that they know how we interact, and I've learned little tricks and things to get around certain little things that might happen on stage that are kind of hard for me to articulate, but
a moment where it might be either stuck or
yeah. There's when there's a sense of that I'm building up, and there's like a thing like it's about to shift, and I wasn't ready for it. I have all these little things to do to make sure that that sounds smooth and nice and natural to the audience and not jarring or anything like that. But yeah. Basically, I have no fear. I don't know. No.
Cody is Daredevil.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can definitely hear those.
So at that point, let's talk about this. Where I love, like, when we prep and we read people's like role within a band, it's usually guitar, vocals, drums, bass. With you, it's like concepts, sounds, all these different things. Where it's just like, that's so cool. I can't wait to learn more about that. So, obviously, you can't just make music out of literally nothing. So it needs a concept where you now have talented musicians all going to this similar neighborhood, and then you figure it out. So tell us about the process. Like, how does there a concept that's generated, and then where does it go to from there? Because you don't even rehearse a concept. Like, you, even when you go in and play, it's still all improvised, whether it's live or in the studio, correct?
Yeah, so I have a corny little expression that actually helps me get set before a set. I do things like, make sure my water bottle's in the right place and the timer is going, because we like to time our sets. But I'll say to the audience, if you're wondering what we sound like tonight, so are we. And that's a little bit dishonest in the sense that I have some general idea what we'll sound like, because, and here's where the concepts are. We are a fairly consistent group, even though there's membership changes frequently, and there've been on each album some new addition or subtraction of a member here or there. There's consistency. So there's my presence from the beginning as the founder. Cody has been in the group from the very first rehearsal, as has Anthony Berman, our acoustic bass player. And so the three of us are kind of consistent. And then I select people to play with us and invite them to join us based on a couple of things: what I hear in their individual playing, but then also their ability to contribute to, make sense of, navigate, or represent a fairly fixed set of genres that we draw from, which is free improvisation, jazz, psychedelic rock, electronica, and hip hop. And so if those elements are fixed, even though they're incredibly broad, and to fuse 5 different types of music in a single set seems like a lot, you're gonna have a consistency of sound, and that was the hope. I would love to say that I knew in the beginning we would definitely have a consistency of sound. That's not the case. I'm just really pleased that it's resulted in a consistent sound across all 5 albums, and even across our live sets. So, the concept is that I'm sort of setting the vision for the group artistically, but once I've said it, I really step back. So I lead the band in a different way. I do. There are times where I lead maybe more aggressively in terms of what I'm playing is very much becomes the structure. The grooves are often really important, or the lack thereof, or the dynamic level I'm playing at. And sometimes I'm throwing out concepts that way, but other times I'll actually call out concepts. Like Tony once commented in an interview, Tony Berman, the bass player, that we were on a bandstand and it got really quiet. And I just saw him, the way he was queuing up his bass, I called out to him, I said, Tony, play a lullaby. And the beautiful thing was, he didn't say, what are you talking about? Or, he didn't play an actual lullaby that people would know. He just started playing this beautiful kind of simple, pristine melody.
Sure.
That we were able then to go in a very different direction. The band was playing really intensely, and I thought, I think the audience needs a break. Let's give them something pretty and beautiful for a moment.
Right.
So that's it, concepts-wise.
That's very cool. And I love that you brought up Keith Jarrett before, because I was going to ask about something kind of connected to him. David and I are here in the Lehigh Valley, so Allentown, Bethlehem, and he's from this area, so obviously we celebrate him. And whenever I listen to him play, there's always these moments where he like audibly like either gasps or like he's almost impressed with not himself, but whatever just happened. Like he's just playing and all of a sudden he'll just go like, oh, like I don't know if you listen to like the Cone concert or stuff, you can hear him just be like amazed with wherever the music just went that he wasn't in control of. Is there ever moments like that for you guys where you're just like, holy crap, that was amazing? Like,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I would think that it was. And then like, is there any one or is there something you can share where there was just like, that was an amazing moment and it might have not even happened in front of a bunch of people, but like, it was this thing where as musicians, you were super like amazed with where something went.
In vivo, that was probably the biggest moment. We turned that live performance into a recording. That was a real like everyone went into it with this energy, that was kind of like right in the middle of COVID, and it was like I think everyone was just kind of like dying to get up there, and everyone, there wasn't an eagerness or like an anxiety to it. It was all just like kind of like let's I want to just get this thing off my chest, and everyone was listening very well. And we weren't very practiced, and it just all kind of worked out very, very well.
So In Vivo, you're talking about is the fourth album, more of an EP, but that's what I read too. Is right now what I've done is I've listened to all of your music like on a giant shuffle. So I haven't listened to an album in and of itself. That I think I need to do that because whenever I read all of the reviews of In Vivo, it's something different about that one than the others.
Yeah, that one definitely reads more front to back than the others, which I think you could definitely skip around on. But yeah, that was I think that's just the whole session straight through.
Yeah.
Very, very minimal, I think almost no editing. So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Joe, any moments there for you, like where you just was like amazed with where the music went?
Yeah, I'm ruminating on what Cody just said because that was one of the things I was going to mention, and so that's pretty cool that we collectively felt that way because after that set, we all talked about it, and there was a conversation with Eric Person who plays soprano and alto saxophones and flute on that album, and he he said it felt good, didn't it? And I said it did, and then the proprietor of Shapeshifter Lab where we performed that set. Matt Garrison, a great, virtuoso jazz bass player, but also a visionary entrepreneur and arts advocate. Everybody should check out his app, by the way, TuneBend, that Matt Garrison is using to kind of revolutionize music making online. It's pretty cool. But anyways, Matt said, listen, not for nothing, but I've heard you guys play here a lot, and I think you might want to listen to this set again. So there was a kind of collective feeling of what Cody's talking about. And I think that often happens after the fact, as far as in the moment and the kind of expressions that you hear in, let's say, Keith Jarrett or any of the other great improvisers who do that real-time emoting as they play. I think it's just part of the expression, but there's definitely been times on a bandstand where I was completely surprised at the direction the band went in, or an idea that came from somebody, or the way we coalesced, or even times where things fall apart, but they fall apart really beautifully.
Sure.
That can be an interesting thing. And I think one of the reasons we wanted to do a live album is because, on the studio albums, we're recording using the same approach, but we're doing more editing, and we're making pieces of improvisations into individual tracks. There might be overdubbing. And I think In Vivo was the chance to say, like, hey, this kind of magic can actually happen without the studio craft.
Oh, absolutely. And even like Shapeshifter Lab is no joke. Like those are big deals to even get in there. Like you were, if I read, taking it slightly back to 2015, you were starting to perform there then, which isn't just what a band that just came together would normally get the opportunity to do. And I think you even opened for George Clinton and P-Funk, correct?
Yeah. So again, big shout out to Matt Garrison and his business partner Fortuna Sung, because they, through a mutual friend, the great jazz drummer Jack DeJohnette, who introduced me to Matt and said, you ought to talk to Joe about his band. He was willing to listen to our work and give us a space to play, and Shapeshifter was and it was a nurturing place for us, and it really helped the band sort of develop and exercise its chops in a developmental approach in public, which is actually really a great thing to be able to do. But also because prior to going to academia and leading this band, I worked in the recording industry for a number of years. Through contacts, people were asking about the band, and a colleague of mine was presenting George Clinton in Parliament Funkadelic, and the band was completely, it was the concept was just wasn't coming to fruition. We were testing the concept in my basement studio with Cody and Tony and two other musicians, a guitarist named Russell Somer, who's now Nashville-based session musician, and a wonderful audio engineer and rapper, Curtis Gunbor, who produces and raps under the name MC Righteous. So that group was, we were having these sessions and they felt good and we thought they were interesting. And a friend of mine presenting George Clinton Parliament Funkadelic said, hey, I'd love to hear your new band. I sent him the music, and then he said, how about you folks come down and be my guest? You can sit in the audience and sort of VIP seating, and you'll get to meet the band afterwards. And I was like, yeah, that'd be really great. And then, the two of us are just sitting having coffee, and then he's like, maybe we should send the music to Clinton's people.
Wow.
And I was like, well, maybe. For what? So he, so then the idea came that maybe we could be a support act, and it was a long period where that was just an idea and it had been sent, and we both just assumed it was dead. We get our first couple of gigs. One was at a club in New York called Spectrum. That was a big supporter of ours early on. Then we find out we're going to play Shapeshifter. We play a club up in Kingston, New York. But before any of those gigs happen, after we play Kingston, an email comes in from George Clinton's representative saying, Mr. Clinton has reviewed this music and approves it for opening act on this particular date, particular venue. And the only real restrictions that they gave us were that we needed our complete set from walking on to vacating the stage couldn't be any more than 40 minutes, which actually is fairly generous for an opening act, because it allowed us to do a full 35 minutes of music. And that, I think that was a big moment for the band. It just would have been in general, but I think for us to get up in front of 800 people who are not there to hear us and have them not hate us or throw things at us, and actually to see the audience, getting into it, and to get a great reaction from George Clinton and his band members and crew was really encouraging. And
I was going to say it had to be validating to what you were looking to do and accomplish.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And also it was a good learning moment for me, because what I realized was, okay, this is a very kind of out there concept for this band, but if we're cognizant of who we're playing for and the purposes for which we're playing, we can custom tailor what we do to a degree. We don't ever want to pander to audiences. That doesn't work, right? They're not going to respond well to that.
Right.
At the same time, like Cody joked about, having that affect of, oh, you just don't get what we do. Like, that's not good either. And so if you're hostile to your audience, that's really a bad thing to do if you want to have an audience. At the same time, you can't pander to an audience because they'll see through that. So we realized there that, okay, for that set, we'll focus on the groove-oriented stuff, the kind of funkier things we do, the hip-hop elements, and actually a lot of Cody and his textures and sounds.
Yep.
Cody, how was that experience for you, actually?
How's that experience? That was one of the craziest experiences of my whole life. Just from the beginning of that day to the end, it was just absolutely bonkers. That was the first time I saw a hoverboard. That was the first time there was so many people on stage. We couldn't get into a green room because his band was too big. We had to hide out in the
like an alley.
Like in the where they loaded, like they put out the gear ready to go on stage. Right. I don't think I remember anything that happened on stage. I assume it went well. I think my favorite part of the whole night was watching George Clinton, because I knew his music, but I did not know what his live shows were like, and they were amazing. They were super aggressive. And they were very, very heavy, very loud. totally crazy. The most impressive live performance I think I'd ever seen, still to this day, at his age at the time.
Sure.
I just left my job to go to make the gig. I couldn't get it off, and so I just told everyone, I was like, I have to go. And they're like, why? And I was like, I'm opening up for George Clinton. And they're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yes, I am.
Yeah.
I'll be in tomorrow at 3.
Yeah.
So
I'll send you
and then,
a picture of it.
Yeah, I didn't even take one. I just was totally. It was a crazy, crazy experience. And then, every time I'm at, I'll be talking with other musicians or whatever, and they'll be like, everyone goes around and tells their stories, and I'll be like, I got one,
Yeah, top this one.
Yeah. It's terrible, but it's just a crazy. It was a crazy experience just all around, and I loved it, and I loved the challenge of doing that, and the crowd was receptive. Not as receptive as they were to George Clinton, but it was a great experience.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But
tough act to beat.
Yes, exactly. So I think what I want to do here is, this is normally where we would probably have you play, but again, hopefully people can sense from how we're talking about it. It's not like you guys could play, Mike Mains leads a band of 5 people, but he can play an acoustic guitar and give you a sense of one of the songs. You guys can't take one element and emphasize it. So what we do have, though, is one of the recordings. I'm going to let it play for maybe like a minute or so. YouTube does have like algorithms or bots that are listening to published stuff. So what I'm going to do is, like, after about a minute or so, I'm going to bring us on. If we talk over the top of it, and maybe you could just speak to some of the stuff that's going on, because it's one of these Cassandra Studios performances that you shared with me. It's just, it'll give a great sense for kind of like, again, what one of your songs or studio sessions kind of looks like. And so we'll let it play for a little bit, and then we'll bring us kind of back on and let it continue on in the background. So there's a little flavor of Bright Dog Red, and like I said, I'll let it keep playing in the background, because actually when the vocalist, or the voice, if you will, when he starts, I want to bring it back up at that point. But
sure,
there's such like a hypnotic quality to it. It might be just this particular song, but like, I don't know, it's just a very, very cool thing to listen to. And then Cody, you can start to hear, is it like ocean waves that you're bringing in there?
No, what that is a frequency sweep along with increasing volume over just white noise with a little bit of reverb, which happens to sound a lot like ocean waves.
Yeah. It's very, very, very cool. And Joe, what this song? The name of this one is.
The name of this is Bright Dog Reddit Cassandra Studios.
Oh, okay.
because it's just an improvisation, and if it wasn't clear from my reaction to your questions, you absolutely get the award for the best researched interview, because you were asking earlier about, are there moments where you're like, wow, what just happened, or you're surprised at what's happening. This is a moment, actually.
Oh, cool.
And so that's why I isolated this in the video and put that on our YouTube channel. This was a moment where it's like, we just kind of hit a groove, and the two saxophonists started doing what they're doing, and to Cody's excellent skill, he could have easily have gotten in the way, and instead he was complimenting what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, when the saxophones start going.
So here's some of the voice. Let's bring this up here.
On the cement, I've been to Venus and back, puffing the black in the back of this two-door coupe, bumping the early weekend. I'm talking House of Balloons. I ate the rest of my medication, started running laps on the moon. I craft tunes, color the bottoms of baboons, and I ain't been excited by rapping since Raccoon. Shout out Rascal. Numero cinco, pink flow. I scribble to the ink low. No, I'm off the brink, though. Drink mo. Turn my head inside of a sinkhole. Now I drink mo.
And I think that's where like that comparison to Diggable Planets comes into play, because it's storytelling that then kind of has some repetition to it. I think it's great. I think it's really, really great.
Thank you. Matt will really appreciate that. The MC, Matt Coonan.
Yeah.
His skill set just complements us so well. It was a really, really welcome addition.
Yeah. He was a SUNY Oneonta graduate, and when he was there, he was a 3-time slam poetry champion, also nationally ranked as a slam poet. And through hip hop and being an MC, getting into slam poetry, he then continued to hone his skills as a writer and expand his knowledge of poetry and literature. And he now has an MFA in poetry, and has published extensively. And so we're thrilled to have him as part of this group, because his talents are many.
Yeah, I mean, it is just something we want to just sit back and absorb. It really is. And you were talking before about, because this was something too, I think improvisation, you run the risk of like either nobody leading or everybody leading, and it just seems like you guys know when someone's leading, and like you talked about before, Cody knew to be complimentary, and then other times you're going to lead and someone's going to compliment you. Like, I guess you guys have built that rapport with each other to know that's where he's going, and I'm going to support, or just know he's going to get there and then I'm going to take over after that.
Yeah, it kind of, I think it just, I think we all pay attention. I know I always pay attention to the amount of space there is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if like a saxophone covers like a really wide range of like the audio frequency, so I always think of timbre more so, and because a lot of my sounds are electronic, and so like kind of consequently they're extremely dense and loud, so I know that all that together would sound terrible.
Sure.
So I always just try to fill in those pockets or be in the back if I need to, and, and I think just everyone else has enough experience where they can play with each other, and then after a while of being in the band, then we all start to interact as we get to know like what I do and what Joe does and what Anthony does, and every once in a while someone's just got to take a risk and play, and sometimes there's a little battle, but that's just kind of how improvisational music works, and sometimes you get some really, really beautiful stuff from those little clashes like that. As long as you know when to rein in, it'll be the crowd will respond very well to it.
Yeah. And Joe, I'm sure you're, as a percussive, you're somewhat always the foundation, if you will. Like, is there truth to that, or is there something you can share about that, like what you're trying to bring to this collective?
Yeah, so the way I'm drumming is definitely part of what gives the set structure. And so there was a time feel change from the kind of Latin upbeat thing we were doing to this kind of halftime, deep fat backbeat groove.
Mm-hmm.
And actually in the video you're showing, at one point as I'm keeping the groove, I keep it one-handed with my left hand, and with my right hand I'm pointing.
Oh, cool.
And because I'm signaling to either Tyreek or maybe the saxophonist to maybe try something or do something. So sometimes I'm actively leading like that, and that's usually because I have an idea.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't have to do much is actively lead because a player doesn't know what to do. What Cody just described, it seems everybody is really skilled at doing. Eric Person, who's playing alto sax in this video we just saw, he's played with Ronald Shannon Jackson and McCoy Tyner and Houston Person, and just to name a few, Dave Holland.
Sure.
He's an extremely experienced improviser and jazz musician and composer and band leader in his own right. So he brings a kind of sensitivity and understanding of what's possible on the bandstand and what's happening at any given moment. And I feel like each person, Mike LeBombard's a regularly gigging musician. He's led bands. He's a composer. And Mike's talked about that, the fact that we all write music, we have a compositional sense, so that even as things are evolving, we're all kind of thinking, well, where is the structure? Where are those foundations? And this notion of the beat as foundation was really, really important in general to the group, but it's become more important. In fact, our most recent album, that was really the main organizing principle, was the drum grooves as foundations for the compositions.
Sure.
I was going to ask a question about that. Oh, go ahead. I was going to ask a question about that. I know for the new album, it was put together under different circumstances than all of the prior releases. Can you speak to that? You talked about the backbeats and the foundation that started, and my understanding is you started with basically grooves that you put together and then circulated to, I guess, select members of the band to start building the layer cake on top of that. And I'm intrigued by that process.
Yes, that's right. It's an 8-layer cake because there's 8 members of the band. So, okay. So, we put out an album in 2020 that was a double album. It was mostly recorded in live sessions at my place. There was overdubbing. But a lot of that album was done with everybody playing together and improvising. And so that was, we did that for the first album, the second album, the third album, which was a double album, and we just assumed that's the way we would always work. But we were, with the third album, starting to see that maybe a little bit more editing and studio craft could also be part of what we do. And how would we make that work? How could we do it and stay true to our sound? And then COVID hit, and we couldn't play out. And so before the live album was recorded, the notion of doing something during COVID that required us to work in that layer by layer, track by track approach, which is, it's done in recording. Certainly in pop music, it's done all the time. The notion of exploring that and also incorporating so-called beat production techniques using looping and things of that nature, and samples, and just like sort of creating the tracks from disparate elements. We started brainstorming how that might work. And I thought, after a conversation actually with Eric Person, who's like, you're kind of, this is an avant-garde group, but it's a very groove-oriented group, which makes a lot of it accessible to people. And I was like, yeah, maybe for this album, since we can't get together, we'll put the grooves first. Which again is a pretty standard, like in pop and rock music, you record the drums and then the bass. That's not a rule. Of course, there are other ways and approaches, but that's a common practice. So I said, all right, well, I'll record some drum ideas. And I started recording, and sometimes I was playing completely free. Other times I was playing to a click track. Some of the things I played, I just recorded as they were. Other times I listen back and say, I really like these 4 bars. I'm going to loop them. And then, I'm going to take this fill. And so some tracks are like hyper formulaic, or formulated maybe is a better way to think of it. And then other tracks are really free and open, and I didn't know what was going to become of them. Like there's a track called Matter You Can't Feel that I didn't think was going to be on the album until the very last sort of edit of it, and it was said, okay, that actually sounds like it could work on the album. So I recorded the drum tracks and all these different approaches. And then I thought, well, of the bass players, Tony Berman plays acoustic bass. Tyreek Jackson, excuse me, plays electric bass. How would I divvy those up? And then in some text messages with a musician who I had become acquainted with, the great Tim Lefebvre, who was on David Bowie's Black Star album, who's played with Tedeschi Truck Band, with Donnie McCaslin, who's who of contemporary music.
Yeah. Massive big deal.
Yeah. So Tim was like, gee, that sounds like a cool approach. And he's like, send me some tracks. And so we had this opportunity to have Tim contribute, which then was like, oh, there's 3 bass players. That's going to change everything. Because they'll all have a different approach. So I had to think about what to send each bass player.
Right.
And, I sent them each 4 tracks, and they sent back 4 sets of equally, inspiring and creative approaches, but totally different. And, Tony was like sort of compositional, drawing on, of course, his jazz background. But increasingly, Tony is also thinking about his classical training and how he can incorporate that in bowed parts, and even thinking about maybe like incorporating cello into some of what we do. Tyreek is, a very like hook and riff oriented composer. And so we have these great bass hooks on his tracks, and Tim's bass hooks are just sort of next level improvisation with great effects, but also compositionally sound. So then I once the bass parts came back, I had to think, okay, well, who should these go to next? And once you add bass to drums, you actually have it's a different piece suddenly, right? And then, and then if you send that, say, to Cody next, or to one of the saxophonists, or back to Tyreek to add some guitar, like, oh, hey, I got these bass tracks from Tim. I've done a rough mix. Tyreek, I think maybe some rhythm guitar would work. Let's see where that leads us. So really, each time there was an addition to a track, the track became a new track. And I just kept following that process until the sound of the track said to me, I'm done. All right. And so just got to a point where like, okay, this track is done. And there were 2 tracks that honestly didn't get finished until just a couple of weeks before I sent it off for mastering.
Wow.
Like, there's some element, and I would just keep listening. Then I'd say, oh, here's the element. Here's what it needs. And I think the last track we finished with track 4, which is called "Away for Breaks." We had Matt add some vocals to that track last minute, and that was it. That was the icing on the cake.
And I've used this expression before in interviews where the way you're talking about it is it's like the way a chef designs a recipe. Like needs something, it's missing. Oh, it's cilantro, and it's like they're gonna sprinkle that in there. Yep, there it is. That's what's missing, or too much salt, or whatever. Anyway, that's what it almost sounds like when you're talking about it. It's like this creative process that something on the shelf is there, you just can't quite put your finger on it, and then once you get it, you're like, yep, that was what was missing. And that's what
I use those same analogies. Those are incredibly apt.
Can I throw a question out for Cody that you just made me think of?
Yeah.
Cody, you were very much often the last to contribute to these tracks. Not always, but often. And that was a particular challenge, I think, for Cody, which he completely, in my view, really met that challenge. But talk about being like this, if we're going to use the food analogy, you were like the secret sauce.
Or the icing on the cake.
I think I would listen. My usual process was I was listening to the song, and then I would just be like anxious for like the next 3 days, thinking like what I was like, what am I gonna do? It's 5 minutes long. There's all these parts, and then
you would just sample yourself screaming in the backyard.
I did. Well, at least one of them.
That was one of them.
In my apartment, no less. Sorry, man. There was it was a big turn. I also write music. I written electronic music for a very long time, like beat-based stuff, and so I thought of it more compositionally instead of focusing like entirely on making like really impressive soundscapes and timbres. And so I was like, what would make this moment pop more, and like what would bring a sense of finality or conclusion to this section and bring us over into another section, and like how to guy did, and I think Joe paid me a really nice compliment when I went to go visit one of his classes, which was he considers me a very, very good problem solver when it comes to music, and I think that's really what I do. And even in the live performances, when I tend to, one of my strengths is a kind of an ability to meld between two different sections or to fill an awkward spot with some ambience or something like that, and
the connective tissue.
Right, like a little bit of I mean, even going back, a little bit of salt. Just kind of brings everything up. I just want to bring everything up a little bit. There's really, I'm playing a computer. There's not a whole lot of virtuosity for me to show off. Sometimes I move a finger really fast, but really what I'm doing is trying to bring everything up and just enhance what everyone else is doing. And every once in a while, I get to be, really, really loud and, kind of go back to that old Cody and try to scare the audience for a bit. But then, we bounce it out. We play a little groove or something.
That is very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Well, before we kind of wrap things up with some promotions for you all, I did want to take a second to just talk about how funny it is that we got to this moment. And it's a shout out to Troy, New York, and Rare Form Brewery, because my son goes to RPI, and he broke his ankle this semester, and so I went up to just visit him, and I stopped at this amazing taco place that's in downtown Troy. And they needed, because it was lunchtime, like 20 minutes to get the guy was buying lunch for him and his suite mates. So I was like, well, I really like Rare Form. I couldn't remember exactly where it was compared to where I was, but it's literally like a half a block away.
And it's like tacos?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect, great place.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, well, I'll just hop over there. And I just wanted to buy a few beers to bring home because I was just up visiting him, stocking him up with groceries, and then driving back home. It's like a 3-hour drive for us, so it's no big deal. But so when they needed 20 minutes and I go in, and you're the server, the bartender, and I was like, no one was in there. Well, then I looked at my watch. I remembered now it was like 12, on a Sunday or something like that. And I was like, I'm the only knucklehead in a brewery at noon. So I was like, well, since I have 15 minutes, I was like, let's have a sample. And so we got to talking. And I was like, so what do you do? And you're like, I'm a musician. So I'm like, tell me more about that. And I would just love your take on this, because some knucklehead walks in off the street at noon on a Sunday drinking beers and was like, why don't you come on my podcast? You were probably like, you're out of your mind. Thanks so much. Get out. Here's your 4-pack.
Just immediately before we even got on the show, I was like, that's the guy that came in to riff for. That was the guy that came into the bar I was talking about. He was like, yeah, man. I was like, why did you tell me? So, yeah, that was kind of an interesting experience, because there's a lot of musicians that work at Rare Form too. It's a pretty common day job for anyone that
Well, I'm just lucky that I got Cody from Bright Dog Red. But yeah, no, I just thought it was so funny because the universe just seems to be providing this whole enterprise, and so I'm just so thankful that I get the chance to have this ability to meet people like yourselves, bring you on a show, to help you get a platform to share your story, your music, and I just get to kind of like just sit back and enjoy the whole thing. So I just thought that was just such a cool little nugget, because but for that 20-minute delay in my tacos, I wouldn't have never met you all. And here we are, just loving the fact that it's about an hour into an interview here. But to wrap things up, like promotions, obviously you have the new, the new album was released about a month ago, Under the Porch. There's 4 others before that. There was obviously a big support of the one right before that one called In Vivo. But any shows on the horizon, any live performances that we might be able to get a chance to kind of sneak in on?
Yeah, this fall, I expect we'll be doing some dates in New York, and hopefully we'll get down to Pennsylvania and, play down there as well. Definitely Philadelphia is a market we've played before with some success, and we're hoping to return there in support of this album. So hopefully this fall.
Well, let's definitely keep in touch on that. We'd love to kind of promote it here, obviously through our listenership, and then also just me personally, selfishly want to see you play live. But yeah, Philly certainly has a great scene for this sound. I would love to see it up this way here in Bethlehem as well. As you know, I tried to, see what we could do to get you guys some gigs around here, but it just takes some time, obviously, sometimes. But
we appreciate that. We really do. We appreciate your effort.
Yeah, it'll happen here, Philly, New York. Would love to see it. And obviously people should check out the album. You guys are out there, obviously your website, you're on Spotify, you have a great YouTube channel. That's where a lot of the stuff we played tonight was from. But thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, Cody. Wonderful stories, great music. And it was such an honor to hear kind of like the thought process and the creation behind all of this. It was such a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The honor is really ours. Really, Philip, David, both of you, to prepare so much research and such great questions. You really made the time we spent together pleasurable and fun, and we really appreciate the care you put into this podcast.
Awesome.
Great time.
Well, again, thank you so much, and let's definitely keep in touch on when the shows are going to come around. We'll definitely get a contingent of people out to see you.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
David, episode 1 in the books.
Whew.
So
we had, what is it? Other phrases?
I don't. In the can, I think, is after the editing is done. Right now, we're on the can.
Yes. Well, shortly.
Yes, after 2 hours of that. So Mike Mains, wonderful. What a humble guy. Like he's a
absolutely. He was definitely more soft spoken in his personality than he was in his stage presence, and that's not the first artist I've met that way. You get in on the stage and you get to perform, and it's part of the whole. It's the music. There's those moments you've got an audience of people clapping for you. It helps when I don't know, do my job. So it's that same sort of thing, and it was really great to see him sort of open up a little bit about those kind of things.
Yeah. And based on what I had read, I kind of thought that would be the case. But you're right. The soft-spoken, the humble, all that stuff was just such a very, very sweet. I mean, that was probably the word I would use. He was very
genuinely nice.
Just a super sweet guy. And that song he played here, that was such a wonderful rendition of it. And then if you go check it out, the recording, and again, I mean, live-wise, they are a special, special show. And there was even some things I didn't even get to ask him about. I could have talked to that guy for like 2 hours. And same thing with Joe and Cody from Bright Dog Red. Like super, super interesting concept that I knew that like once we kind of dug in on that, it was just going to be this wonderful, nonstop conversation around what that even could go to.
Yeah, and because of like the kind of music they do, the improvisational kind of music, the live show is absolutely where the excitement is. But it's neat to hear them start using, because we discussed briefly their most recent release, where Joe had discussed briefly there have been some edits and things like that, but the most recent one was definitely done with much more as the studio as the palette, or the idea of that. And it's interesting to hear how improvisation used in different methods and applied in different ways can produce different results. And it's interesting to see where that will go. How do they express the tools that they want to use forward with and the music that will come out of that?
Absolutely. Super cool. I'm so pumped and inspired for all of season 2. I can't wait to see where all this goes. So I'm going to change the lower third here.
Because we
announcing
have another episode.
Another episode. Well, it's going to be monthly
right now. No,
right.
It's like Netflix.
And go. No. Yeah, right. That's true. Yeah. Netflix. It drives me crazy. But anyway, in July, we have 2. Again, this is where I'm just like, I keep getting like super like, wait, they said yes? I can't believe it. We're bringing on Arcadian Wild and Aubrey Haddard. They both played Music Fest last year. They're both some of the most, I use superlatives all the time, so unfortunately you're going to just have to get used to it. But like, they are so cool, talented, amazing. Like Arcadian Wild, breathtaking. Like it's just
Yeah, it's I mean it's a level of musicianship that's combined with accessibleness that is a really
Yes.
interesting combination.
Yep.
There's and it's truly a unique thing. I mean the bluegrass instrumentation
Yep.
with almost both a classical composition and a
Yes.
pop song composition living side by side. I mean,
Absolutely.
we saw them. They have a 4-song cycle that they do that's based on the seasons of the year, and additionally they do Beyonce covers.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
know, it's
I mean, I was thoroughly. I was already impressed with them before going to see them, and then afterwards, I was just like, wow. So again, can't believe they're coming on. And then Aubrey Haddad is this just rock and roll of the modern sense, and she just kicks butt. Like she's just awesome.
Sometimes you turn everything up to 11, right? There's a reason
correct.
that number's
Yep.
on the amp.
Yeah, and not just rock. Like it's got a whole other kind of like spin feel to it that's her own. And I can't wait to talk to both of those groups. So that's July, and can't wait for that. So thankful for here in June, and just everything we've got planned in the future is going to be awesome. So yeah, that's July. This was June. We're going to wrap it up here with our closing show notes. And thank you so much, David. Thank you, Mike Mains. Thank you, Joe Pignato. Thank you, Cody Davies. And we'll keep the train rolling. Hope to see you all at a live show soon. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Your Next Favorite Band, and we'd like to thank Mike and Shannon Mains from Mike Mains and the Branches, as well as Joe Pignato and Cody Davies of Bright Dog Red. There are links in our show notes to all of these bands' websites, Spotify, and YouTube channels, so please check them out, follow them on the socials, and subscribe to their content. It's very helpful for all of them, and maybe even purchase some of their merch. As always, our hope here is to bring you your next favorite band. If you happen to already know these bands and tuned in, thank you so much. But please stick around and enjoy some of these others, as I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Next month, we bring on the Arcadian Wild and Aubrey Haddad. Both are performing at our Levitt Pavilion Steel Stacks here in July, so make sure you tune in to the show and then join us for the concerts. We've got some great things in the works here, so please subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Twitch, like us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. This way you can get kind of the reminders and the alerts when we're going live. And if anyone would like to sponsor the show or submit for consideration to be interviewed, or a recommendation for my next favorite band, hit us up on any of the social media platforms. Visit our website at stereophilia.studio for more information. Hope you have a great rest of your month, and hope to see you at a live show soon.
It's all over now.